Imagine this. You're at the biggest party of the year, the room sparkling with champagne and applause, and in front of everyone you love. Your husband announces he's divorcing you. Not just that, he's selling everything you built, your business, your legacy. And even worse, your own children cheer him on. What would you do? Hello, everyone. This is James welcoming you back to our family channel. I hope you're ready because today's story isn't just a tale. It's a journey of betrayal, justice, and ultimate triumph. From the depths of humiliation to the heights of revenge, this story will grip you, twist you, and leave you thinking long after it ends. Stay with me, watch closely, and I promise you, every moment is worth it. The ballroom glowed like a controlled explosion of wealth. Crystal chandeliers spilled light over marble floors. Cameras floated like insects, hungry and humming. This was the Global Architectural Awards, where legacies were crowned. Anya Matthews stood still at the edge of it all, not forgotten, not invisible, just deliberately unseen. Her black gown was severe, architectural in itself. No sequins, no apology, clean lines, purposeful restraint. The kind of dress that didn't beg for attention. She watched her husband from across the room. Elias Thorne. Golden boy. Visionary. The face magazines loved. He laughed easily, practiced, and loud. His hand rested on Serena's shoulder. Liam stood close, tall and proud. Their smiles were rehearsed. Anya recognized that look. The performance smile, the one Elias used before stealing credit. She remembered drafting designs at dawn, coffee gone cold, ink-stained fingers. Elias asleep while her mind held cities together. Applause rippled suddenly. The stage lights intensified. The host's voice boomed with celebration. Tonight, we honor a man who reshaped modern architecture. Elias turned, soaking it in. He always did, as if praise were oxygen. Anya didn't clap. She folded her hands instead. The massive screen behind the stage flickered. Thorne Architects' logo filled the room, sharp, commanding, familiar. Elias stepped to the podium. His suit was perfect, tailored dominance. He adjusted the microphone, cleared his throat, smiled. My journey, he began, has always been about freedom. Anya felt the shift before the words landed. The air tightened, her spine went cold. Freedom from limitations. Freedom from old structures. The crowd leaned in. They loved reinvention stories. So tonight, Elias continued, I'm announcing 2 changes. 2, not 1. Anya's pulse slowed instead of racing, her instincts sharpened. First, Elias said smoothly, I've finalized the sale of Thorne Architects to Global Design Holdings. Gasps, applause, shock packaged as admiration. Anya didn't blink. And second, he said, voice steady, I'm also finalizing a long-overdue personal separation. The room froze. Cameras snapped toward Anya. Lights found her without permission. Elias gestured. Serena and Liam stepped forward. They lifted white boards. Simple, cruel, freedom. The word glared. Mocking. Public. Serena smiled brightly. Liam raised his higher. The room murmured. Some clapped, some hesitated. Anya felt humiliation brush her skin. She did not let it stay. Elias continued speaking. About growth, about truth, about endings that liberate everyone. Not once did he look at her. A man approached her side, young, nervous, a junior associate she barely remembered hiring. He held a folder. His hands shook. I'm sorry, he whispered. Anya accepted the folder calmly. The weight of paper meant nothing. She opened it, read once. Enough. Divorce. Asset division. Signatures waiting. She took the pen. No pause. No trembling. The cameras zoomed. The room watched. She signed. Once, twice. Final. Elias turned then, smiling victoriously. He expected tears, anger, collapse. He received none. Anya stepped forward, close enough for only him to hear. Her voice was soft, measured, deadly calm. You just signed away the blueprints to your entire existence. Elias laughed under his breath, dismissive. Drama doesn't suit you, Anya, he muttered. She stepped back, returned the pen. Applause erupted, confused, uncomfortable. The host rushed in, smoothed the moment. Elias raised his hands. Bow, triumph. Anya walked away, each step deliberate, each heel strike a decision. She exited into the quiet corridor beyond the ballroom. The noise dulled. The world narrowed. She stopped, reached into her clutch. One phone, one number. She dialed without hesitation. The call connected immediately. Yes, she said calmly. It's done. A pause. No, Anya continued. Exactly as planned. Another pause. Prepare the trust. She ended the call. Behind her, the ballroom roared. Ahead of her, silence waited. Anya Matthews stood alone. Not broken. Not lost. Unseen. Unleashed. As Anya stepped into the night air, her phone vibrated once more. A single incoming message marked confidential. Morning arrived without mercy. Light crept through floor-to-ceiling windows like an accusation. Elias Thorne opened his eyes, believing, for one final second, that he had won. Silk sheets, glass walls. The city bowed beneath him. Freedom. That was the word he'd sold the world. That was the word his children had held like trophies. His phone lay face down on the nightstand. It vibrated once. Stopped. He ignored it. Victory deserved a slower morning. Elias stretched, rolled his shoulders, and smiled at the ceiling. No Anya's silence. No Anya's watchful eyes. No quiet correction when his numbers were wrong. He swung his legs over the bed. Cold marble met his feet. Another vibration. Longer this time. He frowned. Elias hated interruptions, especially on mornings that should taste like triumph. He poured coffee without checking the screen. The machine hummed obediently. The steam rose. Behind him, Serena laughed softly at something on her phone. Liam stood by the window, arms crossed, surveying the city. Still trending, Serena said. Her voice held delight. They're calling it bold. Elias lifted his cup. Good, he said. The phone vibrated again. And again. He glanced down. Missed calls, unknown numbers, legal departments. His smile thinned. He answered the next call without greeting. Mr. Thorne, a woman said, clipped and formal. This is Global Design Holdings. Elias leaned against the counter. Yes, he said. There was a pause, a careful one. We're encountering an issue with asset transfer. Elias exhaled impatiently. It's been 3 days, he said. These things take time. That's not the issue, she replied. Elias's jaw tightened. We've completed preliminary audits, she continued, and your firm's core intellectual assets are inaccessible. Inaccessible how? They are not under Thorne Architects' ownership. Silence expanded between them. Elias laughed, a short, dismissive sound. That's absurd, he said. I built that firm. Yes, she answered carefully, but the designs were never legally yours. The words slipped under his skin. What are you saying? He demanded. I'm saying, she said, that GDH purchased a shell. The call ended before he could respond. The room felt suddenly too large, too quiet. Serena looked up. What did they say? Nothing, Elias snapped. His phone chimed again. Bank alert. Account review in progress. He stared at the screen. That wasn't right. He refreshed it. Another alert replaced the first. Temporary freeze applied. The word freeze burned. Dad? Serena said, unease creeping into her tone. Elias didn't answer. Liam stepped closer. Something's wrong. Elias dialed his banker. straight to voicemail. He dialed again. No answer. His coffee cooled in his hand. Another call broke through. "Elias," a familiar voice said. Calm, measured. "Cyrus Matthews." Elias stiffened. "This call is being recorded," Cyrus said evenly. "On behalf of the Matthews Architectural Trust." Elias's throat tightened. "You don't get to do this," Elias said. Cyrus ignored the tone. "You are hereby notified," he continued, "that any use of designs, branding, or conceptual frameworks associated with MAT is prohibited." "You're bluffing," Elias spat. "I am not," Cyrus replied. "You sold assets you did not own." Elias laughed again, but it sounded wrong now. "You're protecting her," Elias said. "I'm protecting the law," Cyrus answered. The line disconnected. Serena stood slowly. "My card just declined," she whispered. Liam checked his phone. Then again. "Mine too," he said. Elias felt the ground shift, just slightly. "This is temporary," he said loudly. "To convince them. To convince himself." But the word lacked power. By noon, the headlines had changed tone. Not praise. Questions. Experts debated ownership. Lawyers speculated. The word shell appeared again. Elias locked himself in the bedroom. He opened old files, folders he'd kept for years, fragments, presentations, finished images. No math, no foundations. His chest tightened. Across the city, Anya sat in a quiet office. The walls held blueprints, not portraits, purpose, not vanity. Cyrus slid documents across the table. "They're panicking," he said. Anya didn't react. "They always do," she replied softly. "They never look at the foundation." Cyrus studied her. "You knew this day might come." "Yes," she said. "And you prepared." She nodded once. Back in the suite, Elias stared at his reflection. The face was the same, but the authority was gone. Serena scrolled endlessly. The comments had turned sharp. Liam sat silently at the desk, studying incomplete plans. "Dad," he said quietly, "where's the rest?" Elias didn't answer. Outside, the city continued, unimpressed, and somewhere beyond reach, Anya waited, not for revenge, for inevitability. The message on Elias's phone did not disappear. It stayed lit far longer than it should have, as if the device itself wanted him to absorb the meaning. GDH suspends acquisition. Legal review initiated. Elias read it once, then again, then a third time, each reading slower than the last. His thumb hovered over the screen, uncertain whether locking it would make the words vanish. It didn't. When the screen finally went dark, the silence in the room felt heavier than before. Liam stood several steps behind him. He hadn't spoken since the notification appeared. He hadn't needed to. The stillness of his posture carried more accusation than shouting ever could. Elias felt it pressing into his back, the weight of a gaze that was no longer admiring, no longer obedient. That alone unsettled him more than the message itself. "They're bluffing," Elias said eventually, his voice confident by habit rather than belief. "Large firms do this all the time. It's leverage." Liam didn't answer. He moved instead, crossing the room toward the desk where Elias had dumped his laptop the night before. The desk was cluttered with half-empty glasses, printed renderings, and awards brochures that suddenly looked outdated, relics from a life already slipping away. Liam cleared a small space and opened the laptop without asking. Elias watched him, irritation flaring. "What are you doing?" "Checking something," Liam replied, already focused on the screen. The first design loaded slowly, its polished visuals filling the display. A sweeping tower curved like it was bending toward the sky, glass catching imaginary sunlight. Elias had presented this building at 3 conferences. It had earned standing ovations. Liam had seen it dozens of times, had even defended it in academic debates. But now, seeing it with fresh eyes, Something felt wrong. Liam zoomed in, not on the surface, but beneath it. He searched for layers that should have been there. Structural frameworks, load paths, stress distribution. The deeper he went, the more the absence screamed at him. The file was immaculate on the outside and hollow at its core. He frowned and opened the analysis panel, entering conservative assumptions, giving the design every possible advantage. The simulation processed for several seconds before the result appeared. Failure. Liam blinked. He reran it. Same result. "That's odd," he murmured. Elias scoffed. "Those simulations are crude. They don't capture vision." Liam didn't look up. He adjusted the parameters, lowered the scale, changed materials. Again, the simulation failed. The structure collapsed under its own ambition every single time. "This shouldn't happen," Liam said quietly. "Not like this." Elias poured himself another drink. The sound of liquid hitting glass felt too loud. "You're treating presentation files like construction documents. They're not meant for that." Liam finally turned to him. "Dad, even conceptual designs have math, especially ones like these." Elias's jaw tightened. "You're overthinking it." Liam opened another project, older this time, one of the firm's first international awards. The same pattern emerged: stunning visuals, missing foundations, no redundancy, no safety margins, just enough information to look convincing to people who didn't know where to look. Liam's breathing slowed as a cold realization began to take shape. "These designs shouldn't stand," he said carefully, "but the buildings do." Elias waved a hand. "Because we refined them later." "Where?" Liam asked. Elias hesitated, only for a second. But Liam noticed. "Where are the refined versions?" Liam pressed. "They're archived," Elias said. "You don't need them." "I do," Liam replied, "because this doesn't work." Elias's patience snapped. "Why are you interrogating me like this?" "Because something's wrong," Liam said, his voice steadier than he felt. "And because everyone out there thinks you're a genius, and I'm starting to see cracks I can't explain." Elias slammed his glass down. "You think you know better than the industry?" "I think gravity doesn't care about reputation," Liam said. Silence fell between them, thick and suffocating. Liam turned back to the screen, scrolling through layer after layer of absence. The deeper he searched, the clearer it became. These files weren't incomplete by accident. They were never meant to be complete. They were presentations, not plans, masks, not foundations. "Dad," Liam said slowly, "who did the real work?" Elias didn't answer. "Who did the calculations?" Liam asked. Elias looked away. The answer arrived before the words did. "Anya," Liam whispered. Elias exhaled sharply. "She liked that part." Liam stared at him. "That's not a division of labor, that's authorship." Elias shrugged. Everyone played their role. Liam felt something tighten in his chest. "Then where is it?" he demanded. "Where's her work?" Elias lifted his glass again. "Why are you doing this to me?" "Because if I don't," Liam said, "this whole thing collapses." Elias laughed bitterly. "It already is." That was when Liam stood. He grabbed his jacket with a sudden decisiveness that surprised even himself. "I need to see the originals." Elias scoffed. "You think she'll hand them to you?" Liam paused at the door. "She always fixed what you couldn't." He left before Elias could respond. The Matthews Architectural Trust building was nothing like the firms Elias favored. No towering logo, no glass monument to ego. It sat quietly between larger structures, understated, deliberate, confident enough not to announce itself. Liam hesitated at the entrance, a strange mix of dread and clarity washing over him. Inside, the air felt different, focused, intentional. A receptionist looked up, her gaze sharp but not hostile. I need access to the archives, Liam said. She studied him for a moment, then made a call without asking his name. Cyrus Matthews arrived shortly after. Older, composed, eyes that missed nothing. You're not here to protect your father, Cyrus said. No, Liam replied. I'm here to understand him. Cyrus nodded once and gestured for him to follow. They passed rooms filled with physical models, their internal frameworks exposed on purpose. Liam stopped briefly, drawn to one. It made sense in a way his father's designs never had. The structure explained itself. Cyrus placed a thick folder on a table. These are Anya's. Liam opened it with trembling hands. The pages were dense with equations, annotations, and logic that flowed naturally from one idea to the next. He recognized the brilliance immediately. This wasn't borrowed knowledge. This was original thought. Embedded within the designs were repeating patterns, subtle markers of authorship that no one could replicate without understanding the entire system. This is the foundation, Liam whispered. Yes, Cyrus said. Of everything. Liam's throat burned. Years of applause replayed in his mind, each one now sounding false. He left without another word. When he returned to the suite, Elias was pacing like a trapped animal. Well? Elias demanded. Liam placed the folder on the table between them. I saw the truth. Elias froze. The math, Liam said. The real work. Elias's face twisted. You had no right. It's hers, Liam said. It always was. The words shattered something. It was Anya's math, Elias shouted. I only presented it. The silence afterward was devastating. Liam stepped back, looking at his father as if seeing him for the first time. You're not an architect, he said softly. You're a narrator. Elias lunged forward, furious, desperate, but Liam was already moving away, carrying the truth with him. Behind him, the lie finally stood alone. As Elias stared at the exposed blueprints left on the table, one truth became unavoidable. Without Anya's mind, nothing he built could survive its own weight. Liam sat quietly, staring at the folder on the desk, his fingers resting lightly on the crisp pages, as though he could absorb the truth through touch. Every equation, every annotation seemed to hum with the intelligence of the mind that had produced it. It wasn't just brilliance, it was a legacy, one that had been hidden in plain sight for decades. The realization hit him slowly at first, then with growing force. Everything credited to Elias Thorne, every award, every celebrated project, every whispered compliment from the architectural world, had not been earned by the man who had raised him. It had all been the work of Anya Matthews. Liam's chest tightened as the weight of the betrayal settled over him, suffocating in its magnitude. Not only had his father stolen her designs, but he had stolen the recognition, the fame, the fortune that came with them. And Liam had lived under that shadow his entire life, believing in the lie. Cyrus Matthews, standing silently across the room, watched Liam absorb the folder's contents with measured patience. You're seeing only the surface, Cyrus said gently, his voice deliberate, calm, like someone who has lived with this knowledge for far too long. These files don't just show authorship, they reveal the history of theft. Elias Thorne's entire career is built on deception. Liam's stomach lurched. History? He asked, his voice barely audible, trembling with disbelief. Cyrus nodded and walked over to a shelf, pulling down a second, older folder, the edges worn, the paper yellowed with time. He handed it to Liam. Look at this, he said. Liam opened it carefully, as if he were unwrapping a bomb instead of papers, and the room seemed to shrink around him. Each page revealed designs, blueprints, sketches, and patents that traced back to someone else. A European architect, obscure but brilliant, whose life had ended tragically, uncelebrated, erased by the very system Elias had now claimed to belong to. Liam's eyes widened as he read, the betrayal burning into him with a physical weight. Every project Elias had presented as his own, the first skyscraper, the celebrated bridge, the city pavilion, had been plagiarized, refined just enough to pass as his genius, then showcased, awarded, and immortalized under his name. Liam staggered back from the table, his mind struggling to process the scale of the deceit. This, this can't be real, he whispered. It is, Cyrus replied evenly, and the calmness of the words only made the revelation more brutal. Cyrus gestured toward another drawer, pulling out a series of meticulously detailed sheets. This is her signature, he said, his tone measured, almost reverent. Liam leaned over to study the documents, and his breath caught. The sheets were filled with diagrams, equations, and subtle codes embedded within the designs, markers that only Anya Matthews could have created. They repeated consistently, a hidden fingerprint woven into every project Elias claimed as his own. Every award-winning design, every project celebrated in your father's name bears her mark, Cyrus said. But no one ever knew it. The world saw only the face, the performance, the narrative, never the mind behind it. Liam traced the lines with trembling fingers, his awe for Anya's genius, mixing with rage at his father's audacity. The precision, the foresight, the depth. It was staggering. And the more he studied, the more he realized that Elias's entire reputation had been constructed on a foundation he had never understood, let alone built. A quiet fury rose in Liam's chest. He had lived all these years under the illusion of his father's greatness, defending his name, admiring his supposed skill, participating in a lie that had spanned decades. I can't believe this, Liam whispered, his voice cracking. All of this. And he never did any of it. Cyrus's expression was grave. He knew what he was doing, he said. He stole it carefully, patiently, and presented it as his own. No one questioned him because he controlled the narrative. No one looked beyond the surface. Liam sank into the chair, his head in his hands, feeling the ground shift beneath him. The realization was crushing. Everything he thought he knew about his father, about his family, about the life he had lived, was a carefully constructed illusion. And now, for the first time, he saw the truth in its full, horrifying clarity. After a long pause, Cyrus spoke again. "And there's more," he said, producing yet another folder, this one containing correspondence, contracts, and legal documents that trace the deliberate transfer of authorship. This proves that Elias never had legitimate claim over any of it, and it shows that the theft wasn't accidental, it was intentional, premeditated, sustained over decades. Liam's head lifted slowly. He flipped through the documents, eyes widening as he absorbed the scope of what he was seeing. Every signed contract, every public announcement, every award ceremony. It was all part of the deception. Elias had built a myth of genius that was entirely borrowed, entirely constructed from the work of others. And the most infuriating truth of all was that the world had cheered, had applauded, had given accolades to a man who had never earned them. Liam's thoughts returned to the coded signature. He ran his fingers over the lines, memorizing patterns, algorithms, and subtle marks hidden in plain sight. It wasn't just math. It was artistry, intelligence encoded in every curve, every calculation, every structure. "So all this," Liam said softly, gesturing to the folders spread across the table, "everything credited to him was hers." Cyrus nodded. "Exactly. And not only hers. Her work was hidden in plain sight, embedded in his narrative, celebrated under his name, and financially exploited. And the world never knew." Liam's mind whirled. All the projects he had admired, defended, even participated in as a student and young professional, all belonged to someone else. All of it. It was staggering, incomprehensible, and somehow intensely personal. He had grown up in the shadow of a ghost, believing he had known greatness, and yet it had been the work of another all along. He closed the folders and leaned back, the weight of truth pressing him into the chair. The quiet of the office contrasted with the chaos now roaring in his head. The realization came with clarity. Anya Matthews had been stolen from the world, from her own recognition, from her life's work. Elias Thorne had lived a lie built upon hers, basking in the glow of a stolen genius. Liam's admiration for his father had been replaced with revulsion. His anger was sharpened by the knowledge that he had been complicit in ignorance for years. And yet, through the bitterness an understanding emerged. Anya had prepared for this moment. She had protected her work meticulously. And now, finally, the truth could no longer be hidden. Cyrus watched Liam rise, his movements slow, deliberate. "This changes everything," Liam said, though the words barely carried the weight of his thoughts. "I don't know how we fix this." Cyrus shook his head. "It isn't about fixing him. It's about recognizing her, protecting what's hers, and ensuring nothing like this can happen again." Liam nodded slowly, the enormity of the revelation settling over him like a storm. He understood that the next steps would be deliberate, calculated, and unforgiving. His father's legacy was a lie, and Anya's truth was finally in his hands. The city outside remained indifferent, unaware of the quiet reckoning that had begun. Liam felt a mix of fear, awe, and determination settle over him. He knew that nothing would ever be the same. Not his family, not his career, not the world he had believed in. And yet, amid the chaos, a single clarity remained. Justice, in its slow and precise form, had begun. As Liam closed the last folder and turned to leave the trust headquarters, a single envelope slid silently across the table toward him, stamped with Anya Matthews's seal, and inside a note simply read, "He has no idea what's coming next." The city outside moved as if nothing had changed, oblivious to the quiet storm that had begun. Liam walked through the corridors of the Matthews Architectural Trust with the envelope in hand, feeling the weight of it pressing into his palm like a promise. Every step echoed against the polished floors, each click of his shoes a reminder of the life he had believed in that had now been stripped away. The office was quiet, too quiet, as if the building itself knew the significance of what was unfolding. Every designer, every intern, every assistant passed by him with ordinary greetings, unaware of the revolution brewing in the hands of a single young man who had finally seen the truth. He paused at the window, looking down at the streets. Cars moved in ordered chaos. People hurried to offices, cafes, meetings, appointments. Everywhere life went on as though nothing had changed. Yet for Liam, nothing would ever be the same. He could still see his father's face from the night of the party, the arrogant certainty, the laughter that had masked fear, the applause that had masked deceit. That image would never leave him, and now, paired with the truth he had discovered, it was suffocating. The envelope in his hand felt alive. Inside was not just paper, it was strategy, instruction, preparation. Anya had not only protected her work, but had already anticipated the chaos that would follow the revelation. Liam opened the envelope with careful fingers. Inside lay a series of documents, meticulously organized. Each page had been annotated in Anya's precise handwriting, instructions for every possible contingency, every legal safeguard, every exposure of the fraud that had masqueraded as achievement for decades. Liam flipped through them, absorbing every note, every calculation, every carefully planned maneuver. There was no room for error. There was no margin for hesitation. Anya's mind had already been 3 steps ahead of everyone, including Elias. Reading it, Liam could feel the architecture of her intellect stretching out before him, and he realized with growing clarity how completely his father had been outmaneuvered. Outside the office, a press release had begun to circulate quietly, seeded by Cyrus and Anya through anonymous channels. Headlines that would soon make global rounds were being prepared even now. They were precise, surgical, and damning. Intellectual property discrepancy in Thorne architectural firm, the invisible hand behind award-winning designs. Liam's pulse quickened. The world was about to witness the unmasking of a celebrated genius who had never existed, and for the first time he understood the depth of what Anya had orchestrated. The deception was not simply familial, it was systemic. It reached into every boardroom, every media outlet, every circle where Elias had been praised, revered, untouchable. The magnitude was staggering. Liam spent hours in the office that morning, coordinating with Cyrus, following Anya's instructions, sending encrypted emails to trusted contacts, ensuring that the unveiling would be complete, total, undeniable. Each step required careful precision. The wrong message, the wrong timing, and the illusion might survive another day. But Anya had left no room for error. Liam followed the plan meticulously, feeling both the exhilaration and the terror of executing a coup he had only begun to understand. Every moment he thought of his father, unaware that the entire empire he had built on borrowed genius was already cracking. Meanwhile, Elias sat in his suite, oblivious to the silent assault on everything he had ever claimed. He was still trying to spin the narrative in his mind, still convinced that charm, influence, and a few carefully chosen apologies could salvage his reputation. But the first tremors of public scrutiny had already begun. A quiet leak to one of the architectural magazines hinted at discrepancies in project authorship. The article had not named Elias yet, but insiders immediately recognized the implications. Within hours, conversations in the corridors of power began to shift. Emails were forwarded, messages whispered. People who had once revered Elias now paused, reconsidered, questioned. Serena, ever the socialite, attempted to control the narrative through her social media channels. She posted carefully curated messages defending her father as a visionary unfairly maligned by jealous critics. But her audience, savvy and skeptical, did not accept the version she presented. Architects, engineers, and even journalists began dissecting the claims, comparing past projects, tracing patents, examining public filings. Each post she made only drew more scrutiny, and each comment highlighted contradictions that could no longer be ignored. Serena's frantic efforts inadvertently amplified the truth, turning her posts into evidence of the very fraud she hoped to deny. Elias's panic grew with each hour. He convened emergency meetings with his lawyers, frantic to stop the spread of information he had no control over. He demanded answers, explanations, solutions, none of which existed. His empire, once thought invincible, was suddenly fragile. Contracts that had once promised revenue and influence were being questioned, client confidence wavered, and key stakeholders began to hesitate. The veneer of invincibility was gone. For the first time, Elias could not command the world's perception. He could not speak it into existence. His control had slipped entirely. Liam, following Anya's instructions, orchestrated selective disclosures, ensuring the public narrative would be undeniable. Technical documents were released in a way that exposed the precision of Anya's work, while demonstrating the impossibility of Elias having created it himself. He contacted a trusted architectural journalist anonymously, guiding them through the evidence, emphasizing the encoded signature embedded in the designs, the algorithm that only Anya could have constructed. By the time the first articles appeared, the world's leading minds in architecture were stunned. They debated the implications, discussed the genius behind the works, and for the first time called into question the legend of Elias Thorne. The fallout was immediate. Clients reconsidered partnerships, investors froze funding. Competitors seized the opportunity to highlight their own original work while questioning the authenticity of Elias's projects. The so-called visionaries who had once flocked to his presentations now whispered about misrepresentation, plagiarism, and legal exposure. Serena attempted to issue further statements, but her words only drew attention to the growing scandal. Social media amplified the story, the public fascinated by the rise and fall of a man whose entire reputation rested on someone else's talent. Inside Elias's office, he paced, rage building, panic searing through him like fire. Every phone call, every email, every whispered comment confirmed what he had been avoiding. The world was no longer on his side. The foundation of his career, the credibility, the awards, the fame, was dissolving before his eyes. And yet, he remained stubborn, unwilling to accept the truth, even as it screamed at him from every direction. He made calls to lawyers, to old colleagues, to anyone who might intervene, but it was too late. The trap had been laid, and the world was falling into it. Liam watched from afar, coordinating each step, his heart racing with anticipation and fear. He knew the personal cost, understood the emotional stakes, and yet felt a thrill at the precision of Anya's orchestration. Each document released, each expert statement verified, each public acknowledgement of the coded signature increased the pressure on Elias and the Thorn legacy. And with each passing hour, Liam saw the unraveling become more pronounced, more undeniable, more satisfying in its inevitability. It was not vengeance, it was justice, unfolding with cold, calculated certainty. By late afternoon, the scandal had reached every corner of the industry. Talk shows, podcasts, online forums, all dissected the revelations. Analysts highlighted the encoded algorithms, the legal documentation, the history of appropriation, and the public began to understand the scope of the deception. Elias Thorne, once celebrated as a genius, now faced questions he could not answer. The carefully constructed myth had crumbled, and the man at its center was exposed as a fraud. Liam stood quietly in the background, knowing that this was only the beginning of the consequences, but that the first wave had already hit its mark. As Elias frantically drafted a statement he hoped could salvage his career, Liam received a single urgent call from Cyrus. He's about to make the biggest mistake of his life, and it will cost him everything. Be ready. The morning air was heavy with anticipation as news outlets began broadcasting the unfolding disaster. The city's newest landmark, touted as the next revolutionary achievement by Elias Thorne, was now the focus of intense scrutiny. Liam had followed Anya's instructions to the letter, and the result was immediate. The world, previously enchanted by the so-called genius, was beginning to witness the consequences of deception at its most extreme. Every article, every post, every discussion dissected the structure, exposing flaws that had been invisible to the untrained eye, but glaringly obvious to anyone who understood the technical foundation. The building, once celebrated in renderings and speeches, was now the epicenter of humiliation. Shoddy Build Co., the firm that had purchased the designs from Elias in a desperate bid to profit, was blindsided. They had relied entirely on the incomplete, inaccurate files Elias had supplied. The conceptual renderings lacked essential structural integrity, and as engineers reviewed them in real time, the flaws became undeniable. Support beams were miscalculated, load distributions ignored, and safety redundancies non-existent. The errors were catastrophic on paper, and when simulations were run, the collapse was inevitable. It was the first time the public had seen a Thorn project fail without Anya Matthews' intervention. The irony was brutal and inescapable. Liam watched the live feeds, his heart pounding with a mix of disbelief and grim satisfaction. His father had always thrived in the spotlight, basked in the praise of others, controlled perception with a smile. Now the same world was witnessing his impotence. The skyscraper, once a symbol of vision and innovation, was now evidence of incompetence, negligence, and fraud. Architects and engineers who had once marveled at Elias's so-called brilliance were posting analyses, calling attention to every missing calculation, every impossible span, every ignored law of physics. The commentary was relentless, precise, and merciless. Serena tried to step in, posting on social media, attempting to spin the story in her father's favor. Innovative risk, she wrote, pushing boundaries beyond convention. But her words fell flat. The evidence was overwhelming, and experts dissected her claims publicly, demonstrating mathematically why the structure was unsound. The public perception that Elias had carefully cultivated for decades was eroding, every comment, every share, every retweet adding weight to the collapse. The once celebrated Thorne name was now synonymous with incompetence, and even those who had revered him in private were whispering doubts to colleagues and clients. In his suite, Elias was a storm contained only by the walls of his office. His face was pale, his hands shaking as he reread the emergency notices from contractors and investors, demanding immediate accountability. "This can't be happening," he muttered. "They don't understand. This is my vision, my design." But the realization clawed at him relentlessly. The building's failure was undeniable, documented, analyzed, and discussed publicly. There was no narrative left to control, no charm, no influence, no fast apology could reverse what was now an irrefutable exposure of his fraud. Liam remained distant, coordinating with Cyrus and other trusted contacts, ensuring the public documentation of Anya's work and the flaws in Elias's claims were disseminated carefully. Each piece of evidence was strategically released, every expert consulted, every public comment verified. This was not vengeance. It was precision. The consequences of the failure were magnified not just by the technical impossibility of the design, but by the narrative of deceit that accompanied it. Every journalist, every engineer, every client understood. Elias Thorne had built nothing of his own in decades. The City Council convened an emergency review of the project. Structural engineers were called in to evaluate the designs that had been passed on by Shoddy Build Company. Within hours, the verdict was clear. The project could not proceed. The structural flaws were too significant, the risk to public safety too great. The contract was cancelled, funding withdrawn, and the company that had attempted to profit from Elias's deception now faced lawsuits of monumental scale. The news spread like wildfire. Headlines screamed, "Thorne Tower collapse, imminent before construction begins. Architectural fraud exposed, millions at risk." Every mention of Elias's name was now accompanied by terms like incompetence, fraud, and deception. Serena, watching helplessly from her apartment, could do nothing but continue her social media defense, increasingly frantic. Every attempt backfired, drawing further attention to the growing evidence of the deception. Clients she had hoped to sway turned away. Friends in high society whispered rumors, and even casual acquaintances began to question the legitimacy of the Thorne name. For the first time, the socialite facade she had relied upon offered no protection. The narrative was out of her hands. Elias spent the entire day fielding calls, trying to salvage something, anything. He called investors, clients, former colleagues, and contractors, but each response was curt, cautious, and skeptical. The weight of his years of deception pressed on him relentlessly. Every phone call reminded him that nothing could undo what was already public. The foundation he had built, resting entirely on the work of another, was crumbling. And now the world was watching. Meanwhile, Liam watched quietly, understanding the delicate balance of exposure and timing. The failure, devastating though it was, also provided the opportunity to highlight the truth of Anya's genius. Each miscalculation, each publicized flaw, underscored not just Elias's fraud, but the irreplaceable nature of her work. This was not merely public humiliation, It was a systematic, undeniable vindication. For the first time, Anya's intellectual signature could be measured against the impossible failure that claimed Elias's claim to fame. Even shoddy Build Co. could not escape scrutiny. Engineers, lawyers, and journalists examined the flawed designs, dissecting every misstep. The company had acted in good faith, yet the failure cast shadows over their credibility, while Elias absorbed the full blame. The irony was stark. His desperate attempt to profit from stolen genius now amplified the exposure of his lies. The collapse, though simulated in reports and models rather than actual construction, carried real consequences. Public trust evaporated, and the myth of Elias Thorne dissolved into nothing more than air. By evening, the media frenzy was global. Architecture blogs, newspapers, televised reports all dissected the failure. Expert panels analyzed the encoded algorithms, demonstrating how only Anya Matthews could have produced the structures successfully. The world began to see the invisible signature of her brilliance and the impossibility of Elias' authorship. Conferences canceled their panels on his work. Investors and collaborators withdrew their support. Every accolade he had once received now rang hollow. His public image, carefully curated for decades, was demolished with precision. Inside his suite, Elias sat slumped in his chair, surrounded by unpaid bills, cancelled contracts, and urgent emails. His fingers hovered over the phone, unsure who to call next. There was no one left who could restore his reputation. He had built a myth from stolen work, and now that myth was unraveling in front of the entire world. Every accomplishment he had ever claimed, every accolade he had ever enjoyed, was now exposed as a lie. The collapse was not just professional, it was personal, a public unmasking of the man he had pretended to be. Liam, meanwhile, watched the unfolding chaos with a calm he did not feel. He understood the gravity of what he was witnessing, the unraveling of a carefully constructed life, the exposure of fraud at the highest level. And yet, he also recognized the inevitability of it. Anya's foresight had orchestrated this moment with precision. The failure of the building was not random. It was a deliberate consequence of allowing Elias's deception to face the world without her intervention. The collapse, while devastating for him, was a triumph of truth and justice. As the night deepened, the first lawsuits were filed. The city threatened penalties, clients demanded compensation, and Shoddy Build Co. sought recourse against the inaccurate files Elias had provided. Each step further isolated him, tightening the noose that had been carefully prepared. The realization that he could not manipulate perception anymore struck him fully. The collapse of the project, the public exposure of his fraud, and the legal consequences were converging, leaving him powerless, humiliated, and desperate. For the first time, Elias had no escape. As the city prepared to release the first formal charges against Elias Thorne, a single confidential message landed in Liam's inbox. He just signed the next deal. He has no idea it's already a trap. The courthouse loomed before Elias like a prison he could not escape. He had once walked into such buildings with confidence, his head held high, claiming the world as his stage. Now each step toward the entrance felt heavier than the last, weighted by the inevitability of exposure. The air itself seemed to press against him, each breath a reminder that public opinion, long a tool he had wielded effortlessly, was now his greatest adversary. Reporters crowded the steps outside, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward, all waiting to capture the first moment of humiliation. Elias's usual charisma offered no protection. It was useless in the face of facts, proofs, and evidence meticulously assembled over months by the very mind he had stolen from. Liam followed, quiet, composed, yet acutely aware of the significance of the moment. He carried with him the folders, the documents, the evidence that would finally ensure justice. Every page had been verified, every technical claim cross-checked, and every expert consulted. Cyrus Matthews walked beside him, older, steady, unflinching, a constant reminder of the legal power supporting their cause. Together, they represented not just the truth, but the culmination of years of careful planning, patience, and foresight. Liam could feel the shift in atmosphere even before they entered the courtroom. The energy of anticipation was palpable, a mixture of curiosity, judgment, and the hunger for the downfall of a man whose legend was about to be dismantled. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, legal aides, industry experts, and curious onlookers filled every seat, each eager for the spectacle of unmasking a celebrated genius. Elias entered first, attempting to project calm, but the cracks were visible. His tailored suit, once a symbol of control, now felt like armor against a storm he could no longer navigate. The judge called the session to order, and Elias's cheap, inexperienced attorney attempted to speak on his behalf. Every word was met with skepticism, every claim questioned, every denial countered with logic and evidence. The trial had already begun long before the first argument. The narrative was no longer his to control. Liam watched silently as the prosecution began presenting the case. The first exhibit was the IP documentation proving Anya's ownership of every critical design element credited to Elias. Diagrams, equations, and correspondence lined the walls, displayed for the court to examine, irrefutable and precise. Technical experts explained the coded signature embedded within the structures, illustrating the unique markers that only Anya could have produced. The courtroom audience leaned forward, captivated by the clarity of the evidence, the precision of the argument, and the undeniable logic that painted Elias as a man who had claimed credit for genius that was not his own. Elias shifted in his seat, the first signs of panic emerging. He whispered to his lawyer, urging counterarguments, insisting on questioning the validity of the documents. But the judge remained composed, the evidence unassailable. Cyrus presented each document with calm authority, guiding witnesses through the data, asking questions that revealed the depth of Elias's deception. Each response from experts highlighted the impossibility of his authorship, dissecting each claim he had ever made. The public had once admired him. Now they were witnesses to the precise mechanics of his fraud. Every accolade, every standing ovation, every article praising him was systematically dismantled in front of the world. Then came the testimony of Liam. He stepped forward, carrying the weight of years of revelation, and recounted, carefully and measured, the discovery of the coded signatures, the hidden intellectual property, and the flawed designs that had been passed off as his father's work. His voice was steady, calm, but each word carried the gravity of truth, the authority of evidence, and the undeniable reality of deception. The courtroom listened intently as he explained how every major project had been impossible without Anya's calculations, and how his father's supposed genius was, in fact, borrowed brilliance. Elias's face contorted with disbelief and fury, but Liam remained composed, presenting the facts with a precision that left no room for denial. Cyrus followed, demonstrating the contracts, the legal assignments, and the historical evidence of intellectual theft that spanned decades. Each piece of evidence corroborated Liam's testimony, tracing the career of a man who had built fame on theft, from the earliest plagiarized European designs to the most recent Thorn projects. The court could not ignore the pattern, the consistency, and the irrefutable proof. As witnesses verified the data, the audience's murmurs grew louder, a tide of realization sweeping the room. The myth of Elias Thorne, once untouchable, was dissolving under the weight of undeniable facts. Elias's lawyer attempted to interject, to sow doubt, to redirect attention to the supposed innovations and charisma of his client, but every argument was countered with evidence, every claim exposed as a fabrication. The courtroom became a theater of truth, where logic and data replaced rhetoric and charm. The judge, impartial yet firm, allowed the prosecution to systematically present the totality of evidence, leaving Elias increasingly isolated, his defenses crumbling. The man who had once commanded rooms with his presence now sat powerless, surrounded by witnesses, evidence, and a public that no longer revered him. As the final pieces of evidence were presented, the courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Liam's testimony, Cyrus's documentation, and the expert analyses coalesced into an unassailable conclusion. Elias Thorne had built a career entirely on the work of others. Each project he claimed as his own was proven to require Anya Matthews' calculations, designs, and genius. The myth of a celebrated architect was now exposed as a fabrication, and the man himself sat silently, powerless, watching his public image unravel. Every accolade he had ever enjoyed, every client who had trusted him, every industry leader who had admired him, now knew the truth. The judge paused, reviewing the evidence, the testimonies, the historical documentation. The silence in the courtroom was almost unbearable. Elias shifted in his seat, the first real signs of fear visible in his eyes. For decades he had commanded rooms, controlled perceptions, and manipulated narratives. But now all of that power had been stripped away. He was nothing more than a man exposed, vulnerable, and accountable. Every step he had taken to maintain a facade had led him here, to a moment where truth demanded reckoning. Liam watched, calm, knowing the victory was precise, deliberate, and inevitable. Finally, the judge spoke. The voice was measured, authoritative, final. Every word carried the weight of the evidence, the testimony, and the collective judgment of the court. Elias Thorne was found guilty of intellectual theft, fraud, and misrepresentation. He was ordered to pay damages exceeding hundreds of millions, and was prohibited from claiming authorship of any project associated with Anya Matthews or the Matthews Architectural Trust. The verdict was comprehensive, leaving no room for appeal based on perception or charm. Justice, slow and precise, had finally arrived. The courtroom erupted with whispers, murmurs, and the soft rustling of documents as the verdict sank in. Reporters scrambled for statements, cameras flashed, and the public outside began to realize the magnitude of what had just occurred. Elias sat frozen, the full weight of decades of deception collapsing upon him. Liam, silent and composed, felt a strange mix of relief and gravity. The legal battle was over, but the personal and emotional ramifications would continue to ripple outward. Anya's quiet genius had been vindicated, and the man who had stolen it for so long had been stripped of his power. As Elias left the courtroom, defeated and humiliated, Liam noticed a single sealed envelope handed to him by an anonymous clerk. The note inside, written in Anya's precise script, read, "This is only the beginning. Watch carefully. He thinks this is the end, but the next move will define everything." The courthouse doors closed behind Elias, the echoes of the verdict lingering in the hallways like the tolling of a bell. He had been stripped of everything: authority, reputation, identity, and yet he clung to the illusion that some clever maneuver could save him. Outside, the media swarmed, cameras flashing, microphones shoved forward. But he didn't see the world as it was now turning against him. He only saw himself. And for the first time, he understood what it truly meant to be powerless. Liam, standing quietly nearby, observed every reaction, every tremor in the man he once called father. Anya had instructed him to remain patient, to avoid confrontation. The battle was won, but the war for perception and legacy had just begun. The court's decision was not just a legal victory, it was a public reckoning. The documents, the proofs, the evidence, and Liam's own testimony had done their work. Now it was time to let the consequences unfold naturally. Each player, from Shoddy Build Co. to the City Council, was already moving in response to the exposed failures. The orchestration of justice was complete, yet the quiet work of reconstruction, of rebuilding a life and a career, was only beginning. Liam returned to the office of the Matthews Architectural Trust. The atmosphere inside was calm but purposeful, the kind of quiet energy that comes from focus and confidence. Designers and engineers worked on new projects, unaware of the precise extent of the public scandal, but feeling the stability that Anya's leadership provided. She had returned to the helm not as a vindictive force, but as a visionary claiming her rightful place. The legacy she had protected, nurtured, and defended now belonged to her, and to those she chose to mentor. He found Anya in her office, reviewing blueprints with meticulous attention. She looked up, calm, composed, the same unshakable presence she had always been. Yet there was an undercurrent of satisfaction in her eyes. "It's done," Liam said quietly, closing the door behind him. He handed her the envelope he had received after the trial. She took it with a measured glance, and in a single, fluid motion tore it open. Inside were documents related to the final settlements, including those that detailed the financial and professional fallout for Elias. Anya smiled faintly. "He thinks this is a loss," she said, her voice soft but unwavering. "But he doesn't understand the foundation I've built. He can't take it. He never could." Her words carried a weight that was both warning and reassurance. Liam nodded, understanding the magnitude of her strategy. Justice had been delivered, yet it was more than legal. It was architectural, structural, permanent. The man who had stolen everything had not only lost the court's verdict, but had been stripped of the ability to ever claim it again. Meanwhile, Serena's socialite life began to crumble quietly. Once the envy of peers and the darling of media circles, she now found herself anonymous, her influence evaporating as clients, friends, and followers recognized the exposure of her father's fraud. She attempted to maintain appearances, taking small, meaningless roles in charity, events, and public functions, but the allure was gone. The world that had once celebrated her proximity to power now barely noticed her existence. Her attempts to reach Anya for recognition or reconciliation were ignored, leaving her to reckon with a mundane reality she had never prepared for. Liam, meanwhile, immersed himself in the work left behind by Elias, now free from the shadow of borrowed brilliance. Under Anya's guidance, he began learning not only technical skills, but the philosophy behind her designs. He dismantled old files, reanalyzed projects, and began creating solutions where none existed before. It was a humbling experience, one that erased pride and replaced it with respect for true skill and dedication. Anya allowed him to work in this space not as a rescue mission, but as an opportunity for him to earn his place through labor, insight, and understanding. Anya, for her part, was relentless in protecting the legacy of the Matthews Architectural Trust. She established protocols to prevent intellectual theft, mentored young architects, and quietly ensured that credit was always given where due. Her focus was not revenge, but preservation, not power, but legacy. Every blueprint, every calculation, every design that bore her coded signature was now shielded legally, ethically, and publicly. The world would recognize her contributions, and no one could erase them. Not Elias, not Serena, not even time itself. The city's architectural community began to respond. Firms that had once competed with Elias sought collaborations with Anya, recognizing both her genius and her integrity. Invitations for speaking engagements, project proposals, and mentorship programs arrived steadily. Her reputation, once hidden behind a borrowed facade, now flourished under its rightful name. Liam, working alongside her, felt the thrill of true accomplishment. Each completed project, each solved problem, and each satisfied client reinforced the reality that genius and effort, not deception and charm, were the true measures of value. Even Elias could not escape the consequences. His attempts to profit from the Thorn name ended in legal battles and financial penalties. Every project he attempted collapsed under scrutiny. The public, once enamored, now recognized him as a fraud, a man who had relied entirely on the work of another to fabricate his image. He remained a figure of notoriety, but no longer of admiration. His children, witnessing the destruction of the life they had celebrated, were forced to confront the reality of their father's deception. Liam had begun to understand the heavy burden of truth, but Serena, still clinging to illusions, was left to reconcile the emptiness of her former status. The office of the Matthews Architectural Trust became a sanctuary for those who valued skill, integrity, and vision. Young architects who had once labored in obscurity were now encouraged, mentored, and credited. Every new project carried the imprint of Anya's genius, both structurally and philosophically. Liam found satisfaction in his growth, recognizing the necessity of humility and the value of guidance. The lessons of betrayal and justice had been seared into his consciousness, shaping him into a designer who understood the balance between creativity, responsibility, and ethics. Months passed, and Anya began formalizing her vision beyond the office. She created the Della Matthews Architectural Foundation, an anonymous trust designed to support unrecognized talent, fund innovative projects, and protect intellectual property. This move ensured that no genius would be exploited as hers had been. Liam, now skilled and respected within the firm, took on leadership roles, overseeing projects with precision while remaining accountable to Anya's standards. Serena, meanwhile, faded from public attention, a reminder of the ephemeral nature of fame built on falsehood. Anya's personal life remained deliberate and measured. She did not indulge in triumphalism, but allowed herself a quiet satisfaction, knowing that her legacy was secure, her work recognized, and justice served. Every blueprint, every design, and every signature she created carried not just technical brilliance, but the weight of experience, strategy, and resilience. Liam understood, now more than ever, the magnitude of her foresight and the careful orchestration that had protected not only her work, but the integrity of architecture itself. As the year drew to a close, the office was quiet but alive with progress. New projects lined the schedules, designs were reviewed meticulously, and young architects thrived under guidance and mentorship. Anya, standing at the center of it all, watched quietly as her vision unfolded. She had taken what was stolen, protected it, and transformed it into a foundation of knowledge, creativity, and opportunity. Liam, working alongside her, understood the full weight of what they had accomplished, and a sense of purpose settled over him. Late one evening, as Anya reviewed the plans for the next groundbreaking project, an encrypted message appeared on her secure terminal. Someone is trying to exploit what remains of the Thorn name. Be vigilant. He hasn't given up yet. 2 years had passed since the courtroom had sealed Elias Thorne's downfall. The world had moved on, yet the echoes of his exposure lingered faintly in professional circles, a cautionary tale rather than a scandal. Inside the Matthews Architectural Trust, however, the energy was transformative. The firm, once overshadowed by a stolen legacy, now thrived under Anya Matthews' careful and visionary leadership. Each project reflected her genius, not just in technical precision, but in the integrity and foresight she had cultivated over decades. The office hummed with purposeful activity, designers collaborating, engineers debating solutions, and interns learning the art of architecture under a mentor whose brilliance was finally recognized. Liam had grown into his role, not as a shadow of his father, but as a young architect with the potential to shape a career rooted in skill and ethics. He moved confidently through the open-plan office, reviewing plans, mentoring junior designers, and coordinating teams. The lessons of deception, betrayal, and delayed justice had left a mark on him. He approached each project with humility and precision, carrying the weight of his father's failures as a cautionary guide. Each blueprint he examined now reminded him of Anya's guidance, her insistence on integrity, and the importance of protecting genius from exploitation. The city had recognized the Matthews Architectural Trust as a center of innovation and reliability. Clients no longer hesitated, investors no longer questioned. Invitations arrived from urban planners, civic authorities, and private developers eager to collaborate on groundbreaking projects. Anya's reputation had transformed from a hidden genius to a public visionary, a quiet force whose work spoke louder than her words. Her signature, previously invisible to the world, was now a mark of authenticity, precision, and excellence. On this particular morning, the firm buzzed with anticipation. Anya was preparing to present the city's most ambitious project yet, a revolutionary skyscraper that would redefine the skyline and pay homage to the integrity of design. The building had been conceptualized years earlier, and its realization now symbolized the culmination of her career. A tower not only of steel and glass, but of justice, creativity, and perseverance. Liam assisted in the final preparations, reviewing structural plans, verifying calculations, and ensuring every team member was aligned with Anya's vision. The press had been invited, but the event was tightly controlled. Cameras, reporters, and city officials waited in a spacious hall, their excitement palpable. This presentation would not be a mere unveiling of a building. It was a testament to genius reclaimed and legacy restored. The Matthews Architectural Trust team moved with confidence, setting up presentations, models, and digital simulations that showcased both the aesthetic brilliance and the technical precision of the project. Every detail, from load-bearing calculations to environmental sustainability measures, was meticulously curated to reflect the thought, dedication, and intelligence invested in the design. As the crowd settled, Anya walked to the podium with quiet authority. She wore a tailored ensemble that reflected her professionalism without ostentation. Her presence commanded attention not through arrogance but through quiet confidence and the assurance that came from mastery. Cameras focused on her, but there was no need for grandiose gestures. Her voice, calm and measured, carried across the hall. "Today," she began, "we reveal a project that represents more than architecture. It represents vision, integrity, and the reclamation of creativity. Every detail, every calculation, every line of this design is the product of years of dedication, protected against exploitation, and executed with precision and care." The presentation unfolded with the sophistication expected of a master architect. Holographic models showcased the building's soaring structure, highlighting its innovative load distribution, sustainable energy integration, and cutting-edge aesthetic design. The audience murmured in awe, many taking notes, others recording segments for publication. Anya walked them through the foundation, explaining the logic behind every critical element, every structural innovation, and every design choice. She illustrated how the building's core principles were informed not only by technical mastery, but by a philosophy that valued collaboration, mentorship, and ethical responsibility. Liam stood to the side, assisting with technical demonstrations and verifying real-time data simulations. Watching Anya guide the audience through the complexities of the design, he felt a deep sense of pride. This was not just a building, it was a declaration. Every flaw that had once been hidden by deception was now replaced by precision. Every stolen idea had been reclaimed, every lesson from the past applied to the present. The tower was not just physical, it was symbolic, a monument to what can be achieved when genius is recognized, protected, and applied with integrity. The city officials asked questions, probing for feasibility, safety, and innovation. Anya answered each inquiry with confidence, demonstrating the structural integrity, the sustainability measures, and the advanced engineering behind the project. There was no hesitation, no evasion, only clear explanations that reflected mastery and transparency. The audience responded with admiration, the realization dawning that this project was more than an architectural achievement. It was a statement of authenticity, a triumph over years of deception and fraud that had haunted her career. When the final visualizations were projected, revealing the tower's gleaming facade against the city skyline, a collective gasp filled the room. It was breathtaking, monumental, and precise. The design was revolutionary, yet practical, bold, yet responsible. Each floor, each line, and each contour reflected the careful thought and experience Anya had invested. She stepped back, allowing the audience to absorb the magnitude of the creation. Liam, observing quietly, realized that this moment encapsulated everything: the vindication, the triumph, and the reclaiming of a legacy that had been stolen and hidden for too long. Outside, media outlets broadcast the event live. Social media exploded with images, analyses, and praise. Architects, engineers, and city planners around the world dissected the design, marveled at the innovation, and shared admiration for the talent and integrity behind it. The Matthews Architectural Trust became synonymous with vision, ethics, and mastery. Anya Matthews was no longer hidden behind a stolen name or overshadowed by deceit. Her work now stood openly, celebrated and permanently recognized. Meanwhile, Elias remained in obscurity. Attempts to salvage reputation or claim credit for past projects were futile. His name appeared in news reports only in contrast to Anya's triumph, a cautionary tale of deceit versus authentic genius. Serena, too, remained anonymous, her fleeting status as a socialite permanently diminished. The world had moved on, and the focus now rested firmly on those who had earned recognition through skill, integrity, and perseverance. The final moment of the presentation arrived. Anya stepped to the center of the hall, the model of the completed tower illuminated behind her. She looked directly into the cameras, her expression calm, confident, and knowing. "I spent 18 years building someone else's myth," she said, her voice carrying the weight of history and triumph. "Now I will spend the rest of my life building my own reality." The audience erupted in applause, journalists scrambled for quotes, and the city recognized the completion of a chapter that had begun with betrayal and ended with the reclaiming of truth. Liam stood beside her, a silent witness to the culmination of justice and creativity. Together they had transformed deception into opportunity, betrayal into learning, and a stolen legacy into a foundation for future innovation. The tower was more than steel and glass. It was a monument to truth, intelligence, and resilience. Anya's coded signature, once hidden and exploited, now shone clearly, recognized and celebrated for the brilliance it represented. As the presentation ended and the crowd dispersed, Anya allowed herself a small, knowing smile. A single message appeared on her secure device. "The past is gone. The future is yours. But someone is still watching. Be ready." She set it aside, calm, confident, and prepared for whatever challenges might come next. For now, the Anya Matthews Tower stood as a testament to triumph, integrity, and enduring genius.